cannot tell you how excited I am, and just want to welcome absolutely everyone, and I'm sure that we'll have more people joining us. This awesome soul who is with us tonight to speak, Jonna Rae Bartges. Um, we have known each other for quite some time. In this lifetime, I'm going to have to say. Um, we both live in the Asheville area at the moment, although Jonna Rae's been all around, and she'll tell you a little bit more about that. We met each other first because when we moved here in 2008, being a part of Universal Brotherhood, Jonna Rae was teaching a Reiki, was gathering people for a Reiki share actually at a small little Unity church here. And I'll never forget the first word. She kind of looked at all of us, looked at my husband and I, and she said, "Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Yeah, you're a bratty one, I can tell," she says to my husband. Anyway, she is a double Gemini, everyone, for those of you who are astrologers with us, Sun and Moon, Gemini in the third house. And so I just want to let you know that there's a very witty person, and there'll be lots and lots to share. So I want to show you her book. I don't know, this is called, what we're talking about tonight is Jonna Rae's book, Psychic or Psychotic, Memoirs of a Happy Medium. And this is a fabulous book. It is still available, of course, and we'll be telling you how you can, I know you're going to, it's a page turner. You're going to want to be reading it, especially after you hear all about it. So first, I would just like to say, on the back of the book, it talks about Jonna Rae being a clairvoyant and clairaudient since childhood. So seeing spirit, hearing spirit very clearly. And growing up, she grew up in Pennsylvania, lived in a very old 1750 Pennsylvania farmhouse. And it was pretty, she often would see the visitors, the spiritual visitors that were there, and would share these stories. And she'll tell you about that with her parents that were not quite on the same page. But I want to read you, I want to tell you a little bit more of an introduction about her in Jonna Rae's words, because this really gives you a very clear idea. So Jonna Rae signed up, she says, for a tour of duty on Earth when she was mesmerized by the brochure, See the Blue Planet in the New Millennium. Experience a three-dimensional reality. Hey, eat Haagen-Dazs. She didn't, however, read all the fine print and was ill-equipped to adapt to gravity, income tax, and all the freaking other earthlings out there that she had lively communications with plants, rocks, animals, and beings that are no longer in physical form. So Jonna Rae says, in order to pass as human, she assumed the identity of a print and broadcast news producer in this lifetime, and then a communications director for such sacred earth sites as Disneyland, SeaWorld, and Legoland. 35 years ago, she made a brief return trip to her home dimension, which she does talk about in her book in the very beginning, or what earthlings call died. But she was told she hadn't yet completed her mission. So she came back to help humans connect with their own divinity through attuning them to Reiki, teaching them how to link energetically with the past, present, and future, each other, animals, and loved ones who have preceded them to their home destinations, or once again, what earthlings call dead or died. So this is just, I love how, Jonna Rae, I love how you express that and explain that. And I know, of course, that you, even though you wrote your book in 2010, it's timeless. And everything that you've written about is absolutely it's timeless, and it speaks to us through the dimensions now. So I just wanted to start off by asking, we have this group who's very familiar with and interested and has studied, as we know, reincarnation. Many of us have done past life, between life soul regressions, as you have. And I'd like to just start off by asking, what what made you want to get to a point in your life where you wanted to write a book to help other people understand all of what was normal to you? Um, your soul mission, you and I were talking about your soul mission, and maybe you could give a little context by telling us the three main things that you said were kind of an outline for your soul mission in this lifetime.
Okay, well, thank you, Wendy, and I'm so excited to be talking to you guys tonight. And I didn't really want to write the book, but I, I felt that I kind of had an obligation to because um, I grew up being able to see and hear and do things. Everybody is born wide open intuitively, and we're dumbed down. You know, where our little golf ball of consciousness shrinks whenever people say, "Well, quit daydreaming and pay attention," or "color inside the lines," or "No, you don't know what the dog is thinking." You know, how could you know what a dog is thinking? And you can't talk to your grandmother; she's been dead for 5 years. So we're given all these limitations, and we're born wide open. And I know for me it was challenging, and I love that some of my tribe is here from those days. But I would be doing things like deliberately making my mother angry when I was like 9 or 10 to see the sparks fly off of her. And um, and my parents' house was built in the 1750s, like Wendy said. And so, how many of you have seen the documentary Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi Goldberg? It is a documentary. But so I remember one summer in particular, you know, I was always seeing and hearing things in this old house from when I was a little munchkin. And one hot, humid Pennsylvania summer, uh, you know, no air conditioning in the house. Um, I got awake one night, I was like 9 or 10, and there was a woman in white standing there by the bed. And it wasn't like she came to frighten me, but I was startled. And so I just screamed. And immediately my parents ran in from their bedroom, and they were standing in my room. And, you know, what happened? Well, there was a woman. And no, you were just imagining that. That didn't happen. And then as they were turning to leave, my dad turned around and he said, "It's really cold in here." And if you know from the documentary Ghost, um, according to the first law of thermodynamics, there is, well, energy can't be created or destroyed, it just changes form. And so, what this woman had done was she had taken thermal energy from the room and then changed it into a denser energy so that she could materialize, she could manifest, and I could see her. So, this I knew, I grew up knowing that this was real. I grew up knowing that this is really how we are, and then being ridiculed. My dad and my two brothers would do the Twilight Zone music whenever I would dare to talk about something. So I learned early on that you can't, it's not safe to talk about it.
Mm.
And then I discovered like Edgar Casey when I was like 12, and I started reading that book and the Seth material, you know, Jane Roberts and Ruth Montgomery. It's like, oh my God, it's not just me. And so it wasn't until I really got to get away from the restrictions of my home in college that I could really start to do things like have seances in the dorm where I would transfigure into, you know, like an Indian, and the mobiles that everybody had hanging from their ceilings in the 70s were swinging back and forth, and the tops would be exploding off of soda bottles. And you know, it was very, very real. And we had no context for how to handle this in our culture. And so when I was 24, at that point, I had become a national editor for the local newspaper, and this is all in the book, because I was able to kind of tell what was going on with people when I would interview them. Like I'd be interviewing a politician, and I would say, "Well, what about the $5,000 campaign contribution you didn't acknowledge?" And then he would say, "How did you know about that?" It's like, and so I got promoted quickly. But by the time I was 24, I realized I had to find out if I was psychic or psychotic, because this was not being discussed anywhere, you know, and I knew it was real. And so that's when I went on my what turned out to be a 2-year spiritual quest and found out yeah, this is very real. That's where the title of the book comes from, The Psychic or Psychotic. And I felt that uh, uh, I wanted to share this and normalize this for people, because
Yeah.
this is where we find answers. This is where we find healing. This is where we reconnect to the planet and the environment and each other and the whole thing that has to happen. So at, I was told in my towards the end of my spiritual quest. At that point, I had become ordained by the Cosmic Church of Truth first, and I had become a Reiki healer. I got to study for a whole week with Virginia Sumdahl, who's one of um, Takata's 22 uh, masters.
Reiki masters. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so all these phenomenal things had happened. I had been able to work with people in the medical field and all this other stuff, and I knew that all this was real. But I was given the message to get back into the real world and to teach my truth by living it. And so that's when I became a TV news producer, and things would happen like I would make a list of what the stories are going to be for the night, and the news director would come over and say, well, you don't have anything in the second slot. What's that story? And I said, I'm not exactly sure, but it's going to happen around 7:30, and there would be a fire downtown, stuff like that. So it was kind of and I know I'm way off what we were going to talk about here,
Oh, it's good
but
because really, Jonna Rae, this is wonderful, because what you're helping us understand is that in everyday life, all of us are receiving communication all the time, right? From our
right.
guides and from spirit. And as we're paying attention, we can apply this. So it's wonderful to hear you giving us examples.
So it's I really felt that I needed to write the book after like a lifetime of receiving this information and being able to act on it, and then dying and coming back, because I was told in a dream I was going to have a choice to live or die, and to not be frightened when I had a brain aneurysm. And I was telling my neurosurgeon that I knew it was all in my head, and he said, you're dying, right? So, but it was like that was a big part of it, because I knew that I had to write the book to normalize sensitivity, to let everybody know everybody has these abilities. We're just not taught in our culture that this is a normal way of being able to connect and see beyond and go back and forth in time. This is what we're able to do. So I wanted to normalize sensitivity. I wanted to encourage the healing power of silliness. Later when I interviewed that neurosurgeon again, like 22 years after the fact, to see if I could use his name in my book, he said that it was that bad sense of humor that kept me alive. Because instead of spiraling down into fear as I was there dying, I was making bad jokes. I was finding something humorous. I was looking at it from a different perspective. And so it's so important to realize how powerful laughter and silliness are in our life, in all aspects of our life. Indigenous people know this. I mean, they're known for, like really bad jokes, like a horse walks into a bar and the bartender says, "Why the long face?" It's like that's it's like working these bad jokes into your culture. It raises your frequency. It makes you happier and healthier, and helps you connect with other people.
And
And
that's why you're the happy medium.
yes, exactly, exactly. And one example of, well, the three things: normalizing the sensitivity, encouraging the silliness,
Yeah.
and then sharing tools for how do you do that? How do you embrace that in a safe way? How do you use that in a practical way? But the other thing about encouraging the power of silliness, I after my husband had died and I was living in a condo in San Diego and doing intuitive consultations for people. Um, I had a couple come in, and so we were in my living room, and I was doing an intuitive reading for them. And a couple minutes into it, I heard the cat door swing, and I heard my cat, Dharma, do her little Xena Princess Warrior howl, which meant she had just killed something for me. And it's like, oh dear God, not now. And so anyway, I said to the couple, okay, please stay here. I'll be right back. And I went into the kitchen, and sure enough, there's Dharma all proud with a dead bird on the kitchen floor. You know, and of course, the couple followed me into the kitchen to see what was going on. And without thinking about it, I just, I have crystals everywhere. I just picked up the bird and I was holding it in my hands, I did a little Reiki breath on it, and and then I said to the husband of the couple, please open the front door. He looked at me, but then they went and we all walked to the front door, and I opened up my hands, and the bird flew away. And the couple was terrified. They were absolutely terrified. And I knew that we were that close to, the villagers with the pitchforks and the torches coming up to my little condo door. So, so I silently said, "Okay, God, what do I say here? How do I shift this?" And and then I turned to them and in a very dramatic voice, I said, "I have got to raise my rates." And that was such a horribly inappropriate thing to say, but it made them laugh. They were surprised and then they left and then we could get back into doing the reading. And then after they left, then I got down on my knees in the living room and I was sobbing and I said, "What was that, God? What just happened?" And then the voice said, "This and greater will you do." And this is in some old book that I read long ago, but this is kind of what we're charged with, owning our divinity. And something that Virginia Samdal, my Reiki master, said over and over again was the only difference between Christ and us is that he was born knowing he was divine, and we go to the grave denying that we are. And so a big purpose I feel this lifetime is to, hold up that mirror and have people see their divinity, have people realize that there's no limit to what they can do, especially when they're coming from a higher frequency of like joy and connection. And, isn't this great? And then when you're coming from that mindset, you start to notice things like Albert Einstein saying, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as if nothing is a miracle, and the other is as if everything is. And it's like, okay, we'll take the second one, but making a conscious choice for that and then seeing how things shift in your life. And so normalizing that, normalizing the miraculous, normalizing joy, making it okay to be silly. My slogan for doing my mediumship work is, I see dead people so you don't have to. And that generally makes people are startled and then they'll laugh. And then we can connect, then they can learn and they can go up into a higher frequency because they're not limited by fear or, um, you know, confusion or skepticism or anything. So that's why I did the book, to normalize all this, to make being silly, laughing okay, and to give people specific tools so that they can feel comfortable with this and make this a part of who they are and how they live their life.
Absolutely. That is so, thank you so much, Jonna Rae, for just so beautifully telling us a little, that background and how important is, we can all relate to that, how important it was, and is for all of us, because as we know, we all have those gifts, but in different ways, maybe some of us are claircognizant or clairsentient, or the gifts are different perhaps. But with your clairvoyance and your clairaudience, I love how so often when we're talking, you'll say, well, my posse. In classes, you might say, my posse is telling me, or the voices are saying, or whatever. And sometimes, I think this is interesting too, sometimes Jonna Rae will tell us that she's teaching a class and she has the Practical Spirituality Institute, which is her uh, how she teaches through her company there. And I love that you'll be teaching the class and then you might explain later that you brought kind of a format in, but you're listening to them tell you, no, that's not the past life group regression that we're going to do today. We're going to do something different. And you're kind of having a silent argument with them.
Yeah, one of the coolest examples of that was I was one of the teachers for a day-long workshop at a spiritual center here that was just destroyed in Hurricane Helene. We're in that area now. They just
Yeah.
closed their doors forever. So that's heartbreaking. But one of the shifts, one of the changes that's happening. But they had a whole day of different people who taught there coming in and taking an hour and sharing whatever they did with this big group of people. And I was all set to do a past life regression. I had my notes there. I was all ready to go, and it was time for me to come in front of the group then. And this the posse said, no, 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 do the thing where you help the people, you guide them to connect with a loved one in spirit. And because I am so devout, I said, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm not going to do that. I have my outline. I'm all set to go with this. And then they said, do that. And then I felt a warm hand gently hold my hand.
Yeah.
So I figured, okay, fine. So I did that. So we did, just a gentle past life regression where we set up the sacred space for people to be able to connect with loved ones in spirit. Because again, it's not woo woo. This is science.
Yeah.
This is the first law of
Yep.
thermodynamics. It's just, expanding that spectrum upon which you feel things and are aware of things to realize they are right there, just in a higher frequency. And so we did that. It was a very emotional thing. And and one of the things I do to make people laugh, because things can get pretty heavy, is I always have a big box of tissues, and they're crying, and it's like, tissues are only $20, take as many as you need, and then and it makes them laugh. It's an inappropriate, stupid thing to say, but it makes people laugh and it makes them comfortable, and then we can continue to be functioning on that very high frequency. So anyway, at the end of my hour, this woman comes up, an older woman, and she hugs me. And she thanked me because she said her mother died 30 years ago and she was not able to be by her mother's side. And so for 30 years, she felt guilty about that. Her mother was the one who showed up to tell her she loved her and she was there when it mattered and to forgive herself. And it wasn't until later that I turned my phone back on. I'd had it turned off for the day. And I found out that at the moment when that warm hand was holding mine and convincing me to do this instead, my mother had passed away. So my mother back in Pennsylvania had died at that time, and she was one of the ones who was saying, no, the people here really need to have this happen.
Wow.
So this is how it
Yeah.
works. It's like we're constantly getting these messages, and it's just up to us to be listening. You
And
know?
there's so much healing, and we know that the healing power of so much, but certainly just talking for a moment about these past life regressions that often, you've led as part of, just as part of the day. And there was a story, and maybe you could share it, Jonna Rae, as another example of a woman who had immunosuppressive
Yeah,
problem. She was, you know who I'm speaking about, and
yeah,
just nothing was helping her. She
yeah,
didn't know what to do.
yeah. Well, part of my and the reason I started teaching in general, when I was on that 2 year spiritual quest, I was feeling a little uncomfortable because this center in Black Mountain, North Carolina, the United Research Light Center, where I was um, doing readings, I see readings as a way of tuning into what's going on around someone and reflecting it back to them so that then they can make informed decisions in their life and feel good about what they're doing, to like look at their different choices and look at different possible futures and all that. But what happened was people were coming like week after week after week, and they were very dependent on me to kind of like make their life decisions for them. And I wasn't feeling comfortable with that. And so in meditation in the dome one night, like 2 in the morning, all by myself, I'm saying, okay, God, I don't want to be a guru. Anybody can do what I'm doing. And then the voices said, so teach them how. And then I said, how in the world do I do that? Because I grew up with it. And then I got step one, step two, step three. And that was in 1979. And since then, I've been teaching this weekend workshop, this Practical Spirituality 101 is what I call it. And every single person from 6 year old was the youngest one up to people in their like 80s tap into their intuitive ability. And it's at the point now where nurses actually get 15 professional development contact hours for taking this class. I had to jump through all kinds of hoops and use the scientific language instead of the language that we might be using, even for past life regression, quoting the work of Dr. Brian Weiss and what he's done with that and bringing all that together. Um, Nurses are actually, this is how we're going under the radar and raising the frequency
It's
of
fantastic.
yeah. But what happened was a woman had come to that class, and about 3 dozen people in the class, and I asked where everybody was from, and she was from Ohio, and this was in Asheville, North Carolina. And I said, well, how did you hear about the class? And she said, well, I Googled psychotic and you came up. And it's like, okay, thank you. but it was the book that she had accessed and signed up for it. And this woman was absolutely brilliant. She had multiple master's degrees in all kinds of things. Her mother was a biology professor at a college. And this woman was about this wide. She was very tall and like painfully thin. And it turns out that since she was an infant, she had severe autoimmune disorders. And normally we don't develop those until we're at least in our 20s. And we've had good anxiety build up and stuff like that. It's not normally something that you're born with. And her mother had all her medical records from when she was born, since her mother was a professor and was fascinated with this also. And the woman had no clue about why she had this. And so we did the past life regression, where I made the suggestion that people would go to a lifetime that had specific information for them that would help them understand something happening in this lifetime. And then I brought the group back, and um, it was emotional as it always is, but this woman was just paralyzed. She was just sitting there in her chair with her eyes like the size of dinner plates and just not talking. And so I it was the end of the day, and so I realized I need to work with this woman. So I got another one of the students who was one of my Reiki master students to stay, and dismissed everyone else. Said, I'll see you in the morning. And then Amy and I sat on either side of this woman, and I said, I think I see what you experienced. Is it okay to say it out loud? And she could just nod. That's all she could do. And what I saw was that she had been in the Far East in probably about the 13 or 1400s, that she had been a master of like energy medicine, and also like a taekwondo type of thing. And she had hundreds of students, and she disagreed with the emperor about something, which you did not do. And so as a punishment, her students were slaughtered in front of her. She had to witness all of them being killed. And then the rest of her punishment was she was under guard 24/7, so that she couldn't take her own life. And she had to continue to live with the guilt and the horror, and just, you know, being totally devastated by seeing what had happened and holding herself responsible for that. And so this precious soul was reborn with all of that trauma from that past life. And so what we were able to do then was, through Reiki and talking with her and releasing the past, and scrambling lower frequencies into frequencies of light and love. She just cried for like 90 minutes, and we just held on to her and anchored her. And at the end of 90 minutes, she stopped crying and she said, "Oh, I've never felt so clear." And, Amy and I were a wreck. We felt like we'd been hit by a truck because we had just absorbed all of that. But what happened was, because of her access to like all kinds of lab work and stuff like that, we were able to see that her DNA changed after that.
Yeah.
And she started to recover from the autoimmune disease because she had released all the trauma that had caused that in the first place, that she had brought with her from the past. And that was something
It's
she had never considered taking a look at
it's
before.
so incredible to me just how powerful. I mean, that shows even scientifically, right? Because
Yeah,
she could look at the blood work and see.
yeah.
And so we know we have this power, absolutely, but with help. And she just had no clue. But it's like spirit, she was led somehow to Google psychotic for whatever reason. You came up, and certainly, and she was led to where she needed to be for this divine time healing. I just absolutely fantastic. I just
Another, oh,
Oh, I was just going to say, and not to interrupt, Jonna, I just wanted to say for the whole group here, as Jonna Rae is sharing some of these wonderful stories, so that we have an idea of, how her wonderful abilities, are being used, and sharing these things with us. I'm sure that you all may have some questions for her, and please feel free to either type in the chat box or raise your hand or whatever, so that Jonna Rae would like to answer your questions. Yeah,
well, I was going to share another reincarnation story,
yeah.
especially with this group, about how it helps us so much. Because I had a woman in the regression one time who was kind of dragged there against her will. A friend had brought her along, and and again, I made the suggestion that they would go to a lifetime that would give them information about something they were working with in this lifetime. And this woman had never experienced anything at all, like any of what we were doing. And at the end of the meditation, we took a break, and she came up to me, and she was very nice. And she said, well, nothing happened for me during the meditation. It didn't do anything at all, except I was a little girl by the lake and my head hurt. And and so I saw what had happened for her. And I asked her, how do you feel about water? And she said, I am terrified of water. I I have been in therapy for decades. I've taken anti-anxiety meds, and there's just no reason for why, but I am just so terrified of water. So I took a deep breath and said, okay, so what happened was in this lifetime, you were a little girl, you disobeyed your parents and went down to the lake by yourself. You slipped and you hit your head on a rock and you fell into the lake and you drowned. And she went, oh, and I said, it's okay, just, you know, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Just take it easy tonight. Be gentle with yourself. And she came in the next morning. She looked 20 years younger. She said, I had my first shower. I just love water now. Water's great. It's like, she had healed herself in this silly little 20-minute past life regression. There's such power in this.
Yeah.
And it's like, we know this because of the work that we do. But being able to share that and have that become something that um, totally shifted her life. This was like a decade or two ago that this happened, and I just ran into her again recently, and she said, I still love water. And it's yay.
So healing. So many healing opportunities there. And um, Jonna Rae teaches a number of courses, which of course she does have a wonderful website that she'll tell you about later, where you can find out all kinds of things and that she offers. But I remember once, Jonna Rae, something else you told us about. Well, and really what I'm speaking to here is the power of dreams. Okay, one of the ways that we all receive a lot of information, I think, if we're paying attention, um, are through dreams, because we're relaxed, we're asleep. And I so I do remember at one point you talk, and you talking about, you kept having a repeating dream of trees in the water, ocean. I think you called it ocean trees, and but it just didn't, it wasn't really connecting with anything kind of in your world, even though you lived in on the West Coast there for a while. So how did that come about, that you came to understand at some point what that was to you, for
That,
instance, as a dream?
that was a fun one because I kept having this recurring dream of like a little slope going down to the ocean, and instead of it being covered with sand, it was covered with little round pebbles, and there were trees in the ocean, and I didn't understand what this was. And so fast forward a couple decades, because I would have this dream every so often. And at this point, the Lego company had hired me to open up the Legoland California. And so it's back in 1998. So I'm very old. So I'm in Denmark, which is where the mother park is. And for a 3-week stretch as we're working on nailing down all the details for this. And so one of my new Danish friends invited me to have some adventures with her and her kids on the weekend. And so we went to the first house, the first Viking house in Denmark. It was so cool. And we went to the I forget exactly what they called their version of SeaWorld, but we saw the fish there. And then she said, now we got to go see the ocean. And so we're driving, and suddenly I start to get goosebumps, and it's like, okay. And then I notice we're going down this little hill, and there are all these little pebbles on the hill. It's like, okay. this is exactly what the dream was. And then as we get down to the parking area, there are these trees growing in the ocean. And so I said to this woman, why are the trees growing in the ocean? And she said, yeah, well, now it's high tide, and when it's low tide, the water goes out, and there's a road that goes out into the ocean. There's a little island out there, and that's it. It's like, I've been here. I know this place. So dreams, I call them night school, and
Uh,
I really encourage you to have a journal by the bed or like a little digital recorder because you're getting information constantly, and be aware, pick it up, pay attention.
and whether it's something huge, or even something kind of fun, like when you were doing your psychic shopping and 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 saw the purse that you wanted that was suddenly marked way down.
Yeah, because I had seen that it had been marked down in a dream, and so a couple of days later I was out shopping, and there was the purse, and it was marked down, and I mentioned to the clerk, I had a dream that this was marked down 2 days ago, and she said, oh my gosh, that's when I marked it down. So you're picking up lots of information in dreams. It's
I
very
just love the quantum aspect to that and so much of what we're talking about here, because and I know this group also understands that, but that here past, present, and future all being now time, really, right? Where how are we focusing? Where are we focusing? And that so much of when some of these things happen or come in dreams, it may not show up until in our, as we think of linear time a couple of years later or something like that, but it's all there. It's all swimming around in that unity consciousness for us. And I sometimes just call it divine timing when something aligns, when everything is aligned and then shows up because it is the perfect timing. Um,
And I think something else that's important, especially for like this group to think about is, and I'm sure you are, is how wide open the kids are.
yeah.
Kids are like so tuned in, and it's so important to be encouraging them to trust this and use this in a positive way, and to, excuse me, stay in some kind of a bubble of white light, or some kind of a, we call it a spiritual seatbelt, so that you're staying in a space where everything is safe. But I will never forget when I was teaching a non-denominational Sunday school, and in Jacksonville, Florida, for the Cosmic Church of Truth there, and the kids ranged in age from like 4 up to about 12. And what I would do was take spiritual concepts and then make them so that it was easily understandable by the kids. Like, for instance, to teach them about like a higher consciousness, higher perspective, I got some industrial sized cans of peaches, and emptied the can and put little holes in the top, and then put like a shoelace through there. So I had the kids stand and look around the room and talk about what they could see, and then I helped them step up onto these high cans and tied them on their feet so they had like stilts that lifted them up about another foot, and they could see completely different things. And it was a way of introducing the concept of taking a higher perspective so that the kids could enjoy it. But the one that taught me so much was when I was teaching them psychometry, where you hold an object and you pick up the frequency of the object. And the first little boy was 4, put him in the middle of the circle, and we were in a circle around him, and I blindfolded him. We made this a game, and a friend had given me Egyptian mummy beads. And so I put the beads in the little boy's hand, and I asked him what color he felt, and he felt blue. They were blue. And then I asked him how he felt holding the beads, and he said he felt cold. And then I asked him what shapes he saw holding the beads, and I knew he was going to say circles, and he said triangles. It's like, okay, that went well. And then for the second little person, we put her in the circle, blindfolded her, and I gave her a little statue of a laughing Buddha that a friend had loaned to me. And I asked the little girl how she felt. She felt happy. And I asked her what kind of music she heard. And I wanted her to hear like a gong or a flute, something Eastern. And she listened, and then she very, strongly said, well, I hear all kinds of music. And I said, because I was the teacher, I was the wise elder. And so I said, no, Elizabeth, you need to listen harder. And she was very angry. And she said, I hear all kinds of music. So I figured, well, that didn't work too well. And anyway, a week later, when I was giving the Laughing Buddha back to my friend, and this was in the 70s, she said, I'm so happy to get this back. My record shelf looks empty without it. It's like, oh,
All kinds of music.
all kinds of music. Yeah. So normalizing this, making this conversations that we can have not only in a cool group like the Reincarnation Book Club, but like with everybody and with kids, so that they realize that this is very real. When they have a dream, when they have a feeling about something, when they hear all kinds of music, they know to trust that and to be able to use that in a powerful, positive way.
So, Jonna Rae, thank you for sharing all of those examples. Um, and so I just wanted to ask you, I know that you've spoken about your and shared with us that your purpose in life, when you created like your personal mission and vision and things like that, was joy. So I just wondered, what in all of you've been teaching for a long time now and really to all ages, what brings you the most joy in your teaching?
Seeing the lights come on in someone's eyes, seeing that they get it,
Hmm.
and they're doing it, and they start to trust this ability in themselves. And I know that that's why I'm here, because every single one of us, when when we get together, when we have these conversations, and and we share stories in books. Like, Carol, how many books have you written?
Many.
And yeah,
Oh, five.
many books. But it's like expanding our consciousness. It's getting these ideas out there, and then when you see people own it, and it starts to shift their awareness of what they can do and what they can be. And um and I think one of the stories I have in the book is uh about sometimes people would take on limitations because they don't really want to own the power that they have. And I was subletting an office before the plague started, where I would be doing consultations with people, and the I was renting from a friend who was a very talented chiropractor, and his wife was a psychologist, and they shared this little office that I rented on Fridays and weekends to do readings. And the woman developed fibromyalgia so severe to the extent that she couldn't go up the stairs anymore to do the
Mm.
work. Um, and and her husband, the chiropractor, loved to play cello. He had rented that office so that he had a place to practice cello where he wouldn't be bothering her. And he loved to go to concerts. And um, it got to where it pained her too much to be able to sit for several hours and hear a concert. So she didn't want him to go to concerts anymore either, because then she'd have to be at home alone. It's like, huh, that's interesting. And then it got to where she didn't want him well, to go on trips to visit his kids and grandkids, because it hurt her to sit for so long in the car to see her stepchildren and grandchildren. And um and she didn't want him to go alone. It's like, huh, isn't this interesting? Because you kind of see what's happening here, as she's kind of totally controlling everything about his life. And so the three of us went out to tea one day, and I said, let's try something here. If you were going to give the paint a shape, what would it look like? And she said, it'd be like an orange football. Where would it be? It would be over my shoulder. Okay, well, what do you say we shrink it down to half that size? And then half that size. And her husband knew what I was doing, and I saw this rueful smile on his face. He was like, yeah. And so we shrank it down to where it was the size of a molecule. All the paint was just the size of a molecule. It was coming down her arm, and we were going to put it on her index finger and have her flick it into the earth. And it got down to about her wrist. And suddenly she got very angry, and she said, I see what you're doing. And you could see the pain leap right back onto her.
Oh.
And so it's like, this was something that she was using to kind of control everything that her husband is doing, and she didn't want to give it up. you know. And so just kind of pointing out how, the I love in the Richard Bach book Illusions, he talks about the fact that there's no such thing as a gift, as a problem without a gift for you in its hands, and we seek problems because we need the gifts. And just looking at, okay, so what was she getting from her illness? What, and how was this impacting the relationship? And what was the husband agreeing to, you know, handle, deal with in this relationship? And they had, made their decisions. But just seeing people understand things, it's like she understood what I was doing, and she understood that she had the power to, release that, but she chose to hold on to it because it was serving her in a way. So
And Jonna Rae, now years have gone by, I guess, since then. I'm just curious, have you, or if you are still in touch with them, do you have any idea whether she ever chose to release that, knowing that she had the power to?
no, it
No.
served her. It served her too well. So she's held
Yeah.
on to that.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's
We're
made a
we're
little.
powerful co-creators.
Yes, we are. But when we realize on the other side that we have this intuitive ability, that we can be using this in like many ways, that even just the act of us meditating together um, raises this positive frequency and helps to raise the frequency of the entire world. It's like that's why we do this. That's what it's all about, and it's pretty exciting seeing the shifts. And I have to say, I didn't always use this for good. Like in college, what I would do was I would, during exams, I would sit there and I would think of the professor, what's the answer to number four? And I would names list. So, so no, it's used in a much more positive way. But yeah, I would love to answer anybody's questions or find out how you're using this, or how did you find out about what you do?
Yeah, Carol.
There was a question on the chat about, do you have any suggestions of how to remember your dreams?
That's a great question. Dr. Andrew Weil talks about sleep hygiene, where you kind of get rid of the electronic things that are in your room as much as you possibly can, so that you don't just see it as another place to go watch TV, but you get rid of that frequency of the electronics in the room to help you go into a deeper sleep. Having a pencil and a notebook, or like a little digital recorder on your little nightstand, is setting up the expectation that you're going to have something to record there. You're going to remember it, before you go to sleep, doing like a little affirmation that you're going to remember what you're dreaming about, is a good thing. Another thing that I think is a major thing for us to all be learning is asking for assistance. Some of us are so hesitant to do that, but just asking whatever your idea of a higher power is, your spirit guides, God, your higher self, to get an answer to a specific question, to let you connect with a loved one in spirit, something along that line, so that you're going into your sleep time with a purpose in mind too.
Yeah.
And asking to be able to make this connection. That's also another good way to be able to program dreams and get information about them. And another thing, when you get up in the morning, before you jump out of bed, just like staying in whatever position you're in for a second and taking a deep breath and just, having it come in, because you haven't like broken those patterns yet. And that also helps you get more clarity from your dreams.
And that's such a good suggestion for people like myself who I don't, in the moment I wake up, the last something that, came through, I might have one or two things I remember, but by the time I get up and it's 1 or 2 minutes later, it seems like it's just completely gone and I can't remember it. And I don't remember. Some people seem to remember so much from their dreams. I mean, a lot of detail. So that's a great suggestion, all of them.
And
Yeah.
another thing to kind of change the frequency of your dream and take it up higher, there is a relatively new branch of psychology specifically called positive psychology that was started by a Dr. Marty Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania. And one of the things that he talks about that raises your level of optimism significantly, measurably for 6 months is if for just 1 week, before you go to sleep at night, you think of the 3 most wonderful things that happened to you that day. And it's going to like rewire your brain because as you're getting ready to go to sleep, you're thinking about the positive things, so you're raising your frequency there. And so that means that the information that you're going to tap into is going to be higher frequency information too. It's going to be able to give you answers. It's going to be able to help you feel better about your life, yourself, what you're doing. And then when you get up in the morning, you're going to remember your dreams more clearly because you're going to be coming from that higher frequency. And also, the way you're going to start your day now is, I wonder what the 3 most positive things are going to be today instead of what can go wrong today, you know?
Oh, wow.
So I talk about it being the difference between, you know, good God morning and good morning God, you know? So you get to pick the frequency, but that'll.
You're mentioning your own work, Jonna Rae? She calls it her OM work. I just love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my question, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you for your question. That's beautiful. Anybody else? Carol again? Yeah.
So I have another question. I mean, this is my question. You mentioned early about doing intuitive readings, and I wondered how you define the difference between intuitive readings and psychic readings. Or is there a difference?
Technically, I don't think there is a difference. What I have found, and the reason that I call my workshop Practical Spirituality instead of psychic readings is it can be a lot easier for ego to come into, you know, psychic readings. You know, it can be making it more about you. You know, it's like, look what I can do. Whereas when you're working with your intuition, I feel that that's coming more from like a heart-centered space. And a quick example of that is if everybody could close your eyes for a second and just kind of take a deep breath, and you're just listening to the sound of my voice, and just, you know, you don't answer out loud, but just think about it as you're listening to my voice, as you're analyzing my voice now. What color is my voice if my voice had a color? And if my voice had a shape, what kind of shape would my voice have? And if my voice had a texture, what would that look like as you're analyzing my voice now? And again, what color is my voice as you're listening to it? And how does my voice make you feel? And now take a deep breath and just pretend that you're moving your ears onto your heart. And you're listening to my voice now through the ears that are on your heart. And as you're listening through your heart, what color is my voice now? And if my voice had a shape, as you're listening through the ears that are on your heart, what kind of shape does my voice have now? And what kind of texture are you feeling with my voice? And again, what color is my voice as you're listening through the ears on your heart? And how does my voice make you feel? And take another deep breath. Go ahead and open your eyes. How many of you could feel any kind of a difference there when you shifted? Okay, because what was going on there was our head is knowledge. So this is every class we've ever been to. This is every book we've read. This is every experience we've had. This is knowledge. This is where we're editing, we're analyzing, we're judging. And knowledge is good, but the heart is all about connection. The heart is all about wisdom, and it's all about love and compassion. And our animals are coming from a heart-centered space, which is why when you're sick or not feeling well, your puppy or your kitty will be, you know, right there loving on you because they're coming from that heart space. To me, what I teach with intuition is coming from the heart space instead of the head space. You know, ideally the head and the heart can work together, but for me, the big difference between psychic and intuition would be putting in that heart frequency. But that's just my own personal perspective on it. Technically, they can be seen as the same thing, but I just prefer the more heart-centered aspect of it.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I knew I knew I had to ask that question.
Thank you.
Girl?
Yeah.
Tim,
It, yeah, hold on a sec. Oh, wait a minute.
Tim
Let
has
me-
his hand up.
Yep, I'm gonna pin him so we can see.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
So Carol, I don't know if anybody else has seen this on your screen. On your, I guess it would be your left shoulder, a brown shape just keeps appearing and disappearing
Mine or
continuously.
or
Yours. I'm
wow.
looking at it right now. The brown shape is on your left shoulder right now. So it's not like you don't have to do it with your screen or yeah, that shoulder
Oh,
right there.
oh,
To your,
okay.
now
I
it
I
just went
just
away.
saw it too. Yeah, it's
yeah, no,
Did you?
that's because I have a background behind me and that brown part is my chair. That actually has a
Okay.
logical explanation.
That was a good observation,
All
though,
right.
Tim.
I
I
just
think,
yeah.
yeah, that's cool.
wanted to debunk that. That was a little like, wow, what's going on there?
Yeah.
That was
Just
my
in case.
question.
Cool. Thanks,
I
Tim.
thought it was like the lights flashing in the garage or something. I don't know.
Oh, that reminds me of a story from the first mediumship class that I taught in person at the Spiritual Center. And this was just as the plague was starting. We didn't know it was going to be happening yet, but we started at February 12th, which was the date that my husband crossed over in 2001. And so a group of like 20 people in this room were in a circle, and I sanctified the space, and I've invited I'm leading people in the meditation. I invite loved ones in spirit to show up and let us know that they're near, and the lights go off in the room, except for the lamp that's on the table behind me. So and the lights stayed off through the meditation, and then they came back on at the end of the meditation. So that was pretty cool. How many of you guys noticed flickering lights?
No coincidence?
No coincidence, no. But flickering lights are like when your pets act a certain way, or you just feel someone's in the room with you.
I talk to them
You're
when that
expanding the
happens.
frequency upon which you're able to see. Yeah, you're expanding the frequency upon which you can connect. And it's so cool because these are simple, basic little things that are basically quantum physics in nature too. And then when people start using this and doing this, their whole world can change. And they start to realize that they are these beings of divine light. And there's no limit to what you can be accomplishing.
I'm gonna put my hand up since we're all doing. Does anybody else have a question before I ask? If you do, I don't want to. Jonna Rae, so you're talking about our animals and all, and of course we know that everything has consciousness, and I'm just thinking of the many times, even recently, that I've seen my cats staring at the ceiling and staring and staring and staring, or suddenly staring at a corner. I'm thinking of the time this was so incredible, something that you talk about in your book that happened when you went to work for SeaWorld, and there was a rescue of a whale, and the whale was very, very sick, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And you ended up communicating with the consciousness of the whale. And so just thinking about that, this is, whether it's people or animals or, so many things, trees around us, off planet intelligences. So I just, any of the above. If you could tell us a little bit about what happened and how important it was that you were able to communicate with this whale to saving its life.
Thank you for that question. That's a powerful one. It's like we're so interconnected, and indigenous people know about this. It's like whenever they do a rain dance, whenever they do the ghost dance, and before they hunt, they connect with the consciousness of the animal and ask which animal wants to, give its life for the good of the tribe. It's like this interconnectedness that's everywhere. And so when we acknowledge that we can do that, that we have that ability and we go into our heart, like that little exercise we just did, it's going to facilitate this communication with these animals. So SeaWorld had just hired me and I had checked it out before because I hate the idea of any animal in jail. But I saw that there was a whole spiritual calling for this, that the animals, the way that we have soul contracts, animals also do. And they had chosen to, be in this space where they would teach people, because who knows how many people went on to become veterinarians and environmental activists and all these, positive things when they had this heart-to-heart connection with an animal that they wouldn't normally have a connection with. So anyway, SeaWorld had just hired me and they didn't know what I did yet. And baby gray whale with its umbilical cord still attached had just washed up on the beach a few weeks after I started working at SeaWorld in San Diego. And so a rescue team was escorted by the police. They brought the whale down to SeaWorld and they had it in one of the pools in the back. There were 6 people that worked at SeaWorld in wetsuits holding the whale up and walking it through the water because it was going to sink and drown. Because this, just the sheer weight of it, they didn't know if the whale had had the first milk from the mother. It was just such a tragic thing. It was covered in wounds from being, pushed against the rocks by the waves. It wasn't looking good. And so it was around midnight. So I knelt by the pool and I went into my heart and I thought at the whale, how can we help you live? And I was hit between the eyes with the words amino acids. And this was in the mid 90s. And I had no idea what amino acids were. Nobody did yet. It wasn't that big a thing. But I walked over to one of the vets, like I knew what I was doing. And I said, have you checked her amino acids? And so anyway, they did a blood panel and her taurine levels are critically low. And that is the amino acid that's in charge of both the heart and the brain. And so they started giving her massive amounts of natural taurine immediately. And she not only survived, she totally thrived. And SeaWorld had her for a year before they took her back out into the ocean to rejoin the gray whale migration. But the whole time she was there, being rehabbed and all that, every time I would go over to the big pool where she was and I would put my hands against the glass, this huge whale head would come up against the glass and, with that great big eye, and we would trade pictures back and forth. And I would show her that she was going back out into the ocean. I would send her that picture. And she sent me the picture of her mother being killed by, orcas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when she was, being born. So I never did tell the vets how I knew about the amino acids. I didn't think that would go over real well. But again, that's what we're working to do, to normalize the whole thing.
So powerful, such a powerful story. And I feel like, and so I'm thinking now animals, but trees. I feel like and I'm not really sure this one was in your book, but we were talking about trees and the consciousness of trees. And at one point, Jonna Rae, you were saying that you had, as a journalist person, you had interviewed the woman who lived in a tree for I'm forgetting her name, for however many years. And she had been communicating on a pretty ongoing basis with this tree and was receiving a lot of information. And that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, the woman's name was Julia Butterfly Hill, and she lived in one of the giant redwoods for 2 years to protest the clear cutting that they were doing in the ancient forests. And so I asked her, my whole thing is the happy medium and having that sense of humor, usually it works and makes a connection. But apparently when you're an activist and you're doing something that's in the global spotlight, you have to be very, very serious. But she explained to me that there was another woman now, like a year or so after Julia had been in the tree, and she was in Humboldt County, and she was living in a tree to also protest the cutting. And so I said, so would that be a branch office? And she just ignored me and kept on talking about that. So it's like I felt my hand was slapped. But anyway, I asked her what Luna, the tree, had taught her while she lived in the tree for 2 years. And she said that the tree taught her to breathe in negativity, to breathe in toxicity, breathe deeply and process it, and then breathe out love and light. And when you think about it, that's photosynthesis. That's what a tree does, where it takes in, the
Hmm.
carbon dioxide and gives us oxygen.
Right.
Wow. And life. I mean, without that oxygen, we wouldn't be able to live.
Yeah.
So, wow. It's just so, it's what I love, and just listening to you and expressing these things once again, just that unity consciousness and that interwoven tapestry that we're all a part of. And so much that we can learn, teach each other, but also learn from each other. And there's just so many examples of that. It's about quarter after. I just wondered, there's a number of other stories I'd love to ask you about, but I wanted to make sure, Jonna Rae, that for people that would really love to talk to you perhaps about an individual session, how can they find your book and other things that you're offering, the types of classes that you're offering. Can you tell us how we can be in touch with you? How can we find out all these wonderful details?
Okay. You can just think at me and I will contact you. No, but seriously. Oh, okay. Carol just posted my website.
Thank you.
Yay. Yay. But I would kind of love to hear from you guys. Like, how do you use your intuition? How, you know, how do you like take the intuitive you and the work you, maybe, or the family you, and then weave them together? Because to me, that's why we're here, so that we can do this work and help to raise that frequency and normalize all of this. And I know that you guys are doing this too in your work and in your home life. And if anybody has a story, I would love to hear how you're doing it.
I know we have lots of gifted people out there.
I know we do. Everybody's glowing.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that cool? Because you can see their auras, right, Jonna Rae?
Just,
Yeah.
sometimes just light around them, and it's just kind of nice. Santa, did you have your hand up? No? Okay.
People are being shy.
Can I ask you about the Light Center? You mentioned it a few times, and I've been there. I love the Light Center. Is it still an ongoing center?
It is. During the COVID, it kind of had to change everything, but it's open. It's doing regular uh, programs, meditations, things along that line. And if you go to United Research, you just Google that, you'll get to their website and you can see the things that they're doing. But yeah, it was one man's vision. Jim Gore had been uh, a physicist in the Navy and an officer, and he saw that when the atom was split, there was pure light in the center of it, and that inspired him to create this light center. And on the ground floor in the middle was a big round room inside this big white dome, and it had different colored lights on it. And so you would sit bathed in red lights for 5 minutes, and then it would switch to orange lights, and it would go up the chakra colors with the lights. And there were all kinds of visions and healings and things like that that happened there through the years. So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I
And
love the
Jonna Rae was the resident intuitive for the Light Center for many years.
Where is it located?
Black Mountain, North Carolina.
It's really close to Asheville. If you're not sure where Black Mountain is, you might have heard of Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in Western North Carolina. Yeah. I will say that I believe the road has been repaired out to the Light Center during Hurricane Helene recently, end of September here. A lot of Route 9 that leads out to the Light Center half or completely washed away. And you could only get out there by helicopter. I think it's been, do you know, Jonna Rae, do you know if it's been restored all the way?
I think it is
Okay.
reopened now. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful center and they have wonderful programs there. And it's opened, the dome part is open 24 hours a day. Yeah.
Wow.
Something else I wanted to mention real quick was, all the stuff we're seeing now about drones and all that interesting thing, and people kind of wondering, what the heck is this all about? And Dr. Stephen Greer, who used to be an emergency room doctor here in Asheville, uh, is on the global platform now, leading people into understanding about connections with aliens and doing meditations to connect with them and all this cool stuff. And
Mhm.
something that happened with a friend of ours a couple years back. This guy is brilliant. He's like an acupuncturist. He's a general contractor. He's like a Renaissance man, and he was always very, very interested in aliens. He and his wife, also an acupuncturist, were very into this, and they built a beautiful home on the Parkway, the Smoky Mountain Parkway. So it was like off in the mountains, and they had some people over for dinner one night, and Dave was talking about how much he really um, believed in aliens and really wanted to have some kind of a connection. And they're out on the balcony at night looking over the gorge, and there's they see Venus in the sky, and it's like, wow, it's really bright. And as they're looking at Venus, Venus starts getting bigger and bigger. It's not Venus, and it's coming in, and David is so excited, and then suddenly he starts to get a little fearful. And then what happens is this bright light then turns around and goes back out. And so what happened was he went from a high frequency into being fearful of this, and it picked up on that. And it's like, well, if you're scared, no, we don't want to frighten you. We're not here to do that. And so I found that very interesting, that they were so tuned in to his emotional reaction to seeing them. And then I had a dream vision one time years ago where I saw the face of like a mantis being, like a big green praying mantis face, but there were like jewels inlaid in her face. She was absolutely beautiful. Her eyes had like such wisdom and compassion in them. And I just saw her face, and it was coming closer to me. And then that face transformed into the face of, it was more of a canine face, and I knew that it was male. But again, such compassion in the eyes, and it was coming closer. And then it switched back to the female mantis. And I said, in this vision, why are you showing me your faces? And she said, so you will know us. So the whole thing was about being able to discern between what truly is one of these higher intelligent beings coming from off Earth versus something that's being fabricated to frighten us or control us. And so something I would strongly recommend you do is, if you're interested in this, in finding out more about this, being able to just stay discerning the whole time, because there will be attempts to kind of frighten us and all that. Whereas the intent of the people who really are the aliens is to help us take care of our planet. We're a unique frequency here. We offer something special to the consciousness of the entire universe here. And by us staying in that heart-centered space and staying in a place of being compassionate and curious, it's gonna be good. Because another dream was, I was in a very tall building that was mainly like glass, so you could see everything, and all these UFOs were starting to decloak. They were starting to make themselves visible to us on Earth, and this was happening, I knew, all over the entire planet.
Mhm.
And what was happening, some people were absolutely terrified, and they were just going on a rampage and like committing suicide, and some people were saying, this is great, we can meet these people now, we can find out what we have in common. And the children were fascinated. Unless they saw their parents being frightened, then they would be frightened. And then what happened in the next part of the dream, let's say that this would be the big glass building, and this would be their their huge craft, one of the many that were there. And because of their advanced technology, they were able to basically anchor their craft onto the building and create like a huge room. They could change the molecular structure of the physical building to then add like a big auditorium. And they were able to bring all the world leaders together, all the contemporary world leaders. And then they were saying to them, okay, now we had a deal. You were going to let your people know that we were real so that when we showed up to help you, they were not going to be frightened. And you did not keep your end of the deal. And the person who was in charge of them, the main one, looked a lot like Ganesh, like an elephantine type head and the long trunk. And he was wearing a hat and a robe that I knew were intricately, can't talk, very deeply embroidered, but it was all alive. Everything had a consciousness, and the clothing was a living thing.
Was alive.
Yeah, and I realized that he had mutated the trunk so that whatever planet he was on, he would be able to breathe, whatever the atmosphere was. And then the big eyes were actually like lenses that he had so that he could adapt to whatever the light was in a particular place where he was. But they were coming from a place of great compassion and great concern because they came to help us. And our leaders had not let us know that this was just like, again, normalizing something that we had never really considered. And 2 weeks after I had that dream, this was back in 2002, I was driving someplace and listening to NPR, and the British government had just admitted that an incident that happened in the 80s in Rotterdam Forest, I believe, had been an alien cover-up. And then the French government came out and admitted that they had done some UFO cover-ups, and other countries were doing that. And I was thinking, maybe that really wasn't a dream. And I was so excited that maybe our government would, release everything and open everything up and have full disclosure then, but it's still in the process. But what I would say to you, the big takeaway from that is, they're real. To think that they're not is kind of, mathematically impossible, and they're compassionate and they want to help us. And so just staying in your heart and being open to that concept
so important. And I hope that we're going to hear something that's shared from our government very, very soon. Jonna Rae, we have a question we have a hand up, has been patiently waiting, and I believe it's Rebecca.
Yes, hi.
Oh, thank you so much for your question. What's your question?
My question is, I guess in your humanness, do you still have moments of doubting your intuition? Because I know for me, I feel like I'm sort of just beginning to understand things. And there's things I know, but then, my head gets involved and it's hard for me to kind of stay on track. So do you have any advice on how to overcome that or help with that?
That's a great question. Because yes, we're still human, we're learning, we're like working up to our wings. And when something happens, the thing that is a saving grace for me is just stopping and going into my heart and the mental traffic light. If I'm wondering, okay, is this real or am I making this up? What I'll do in my mind's eye, I will imagine a traffic light, and then I'll see what color light is lit up. And if it's the red light, your answer is no. If it's a green light, your answer is yes. And if it's the yellow light, it's proceed with caution. And that works for like little things, like which lane should I be in? And it works for big cosmic things. But
wow,
yeah, questioning yourself, I think, is so smart, because we are human, and it's staying in the heart, out of the ego, and just realizing we're going to make human mistakes sometimes, and learning from that. Because another thing is, okay, what's the lesson here? What's the meaning in this? What's the gift in here? So, but yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So yeah, staying out of
Thank you.
the ego, staying in your heart.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. I know we're all wondering that one, I think.
And it's good that we do. It's an old yin yang thing that I have up there to remind me too. So
Then you can call an intuitive friend lots of times and say,
yes,
I was just wondering.
that helps. That helps too.
Anybody else? Some questions for Jonna Rae?
Yes.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Florence. Yeah. You might have to unmute yourself, Lawrence.
You're still muted. I can't hear you.
Well, in your case, you wouldn't need for me to, you would already know, right?
Oh, touche. The birthday boy is doing it.
But I think for the rest of us, it'd probably be good to just articulate a little louder. It seems to me that we are all brought here at this time to assist the transformation of human consciousness and, excuse me, because we're going through this enormous shift.
Yeah.
And there is a tremendous amount of fear out there. And we're not here just to entertain ourselves or, we are here to serve. And I'm just wondering if that's true for you, what do you feel is the most important way for us to do so?
That is a beautiful question, and I'm so glad you asked that. And I totally agree with you. And back in 2008, I had a dream that had three parts. The first part was these huge semis were unloading all these orangish red steel girders at all the intersections all around the country so that we couldn't travel, we couldn't get together with each other and all that. And I realized in retrospect that was foretelling COVID because the girders were the same color as the COVID virus is represented. The second part of that was rather terrifying. It was people dressed up like all in black and breaking into people's houses. It was the rise of like the paramilitary groups, the all that stuff that was going on. And then the third part was, and this is very specific, remember this is 2008, the president was not reelected. And so instead of accepting that, he created such chaos that he could basically declare martial law and have complete anarchy happen and stay in power indefinitely. And it was the end of our democracy. And after I had that dream that was so specific, I got on my knees again and said, what can I do? How can I make a difference? How can I help preserve democracy and preserve our nation? And what I was getting was teach, like help people get in touch with their intuitive ability, help them, give them healing tools. And that was when I got a hold of the woman that founded the church that Carol and Wendy and I all believe in, or are minister directors with, to help me use my Reiki mastership. I've been a Reiki master for 7 years and hadn't used it. And I needed to know, how do I teach this? How do I give people the ability to bring a balance to something? Because that's what Reiki does. And so, and how to teach them to get in touch with their intuitive ability, how to help them learn what they can do. And the thing that happened on January 6th for me was I was beside myself, just thinking, oh my God. And then looking back on it, 2020 was the first time since I had the dream in 2008 where that was the situation where the incumbent was not reelected. And what has happened is we have raised the consciousness of the planet and of our country to the point where it did the possible future I was shown in 2008 did not unfold the way that it was shown to me. It did not happen then. We've had like some time to like raise awareness and to do some healing. And the thing now that is giving me great hope is there's pushback now. It's like there's more awareness now. Young people are saying no, old guard Republicans. And please forgive me, you guys, if I'm, stepping on your political toes. I don't mean to, but a democracy is completely different than some of the concepts that are being represented by the incoming person again. I think you follow me on that. And so some of the old guard Republicans are saying, no, we're not going to approve Matt Gaetz. We're not going to, do this or do that. So I, I feel that so many of us have reincarnated now from times when there was a major crisis going on in their nation or in the world. Like, I'm sure many of us here remember the fall of Atlantis. I'm sure many of us here remember the fall of Rome. Um, and
Mhm.
so I feel that in addition to the consciousness that we get from dreams and things like that, we're here so that we can call on these skills that we had and say and do things that maybe we didn't previously, so that we can prevent just pure fear from being the norm, so that we can maintain that higher frequency. That's part of some of the silliness that I'm talking about, because when you're able to make jokes, when you're able to find the lightness in the situation, you prevent the fear and the manipulation from totally taking over and choking the life from people and from the nation. I feel that so many of us are here from colonial times too, me included. I found out in a regression I was Thomas Jefferson's mom, and I'm the one who pushed him into writing in politics because women didn't have a voice. So, and his mother's name, I found out afterwards, was Jane Randolph. Yeah, I'm Jonna Rae, and she died of an aneurysm. So did I, but I came back. So, but anyway, I just feel that the sacred frequency of democracy and of what we stand for. And not that everything we did to create our nation was lily white. We made lots of mistakes, but still, bottom line, I think the fact that we're here now is incredibly purposeful. And we're to find each other, and we're to work together, and we're to take a stand and care about what happens on a bigger level than just us. That makes sense? Where do you stand with it? What do you feel about it?
I feel that our greatest challenge is fear.
Yep.
And when politics is controlling people, um, it for some people that puts them at ease because they're afraid of their own power, and they would rather be dominated than free. And that's probably our biggest challenge. If we can trust ourselves not to lie to ourselves or to anyone else, it would change the world, because then we wouldn't have to be afraid of ourselves or one another. And that would be very bad for certain businesses that are thriving on fear.
Yeah.
Now, all that money could go into feeding the hungry, educating,
Yeah.
and, healing this earth. This Mother Earth needs our love, our healing. And if we can have freedom to be who we really are, then we won't be afraid.
That is so beautifully said. And I think that's why we we hunger for groups like this, where we
Yeah.
can remind each other that we are divine.
Yeah.
I think that's why we
We
do
do.
the work that we do.
And that's a fearsome thing for a lot of people, especially that's been propagated by organized religions and governments and so on to keep people stupid and afraid and needing to support those who are providing services to help them, when they could really help themselves if they trusted themselves.
Something that gave me great hope, and I think it speaks to what you're talking about, is um, Wendy and I are, and Janet, who's on here with us, and Cindy, we're in the heart of where Helene came in and destroyed millions of trees, and so many people were trapped in their cars and buried in the mud, and they won't be found ever, and in in the wake of this incredible, heartbreaking destruction that no one saw coming, that there was no way we could have possibly prepared for that here in the mountains, we are seeing such an outpouring of compassion and connection, and people coming in, even from Canada, to help us. And it's like, as when the storm had just been over briefly, there were bubbas coming out with their chainsaws to open up the roads again, because houses were and cars were crushed, roads were completely blocked, and it was people working together who normally wouldn't even acknowledge each other existed, but coming together for the good of all. And those of us who got power, we were without power for weeks, and those of us who did get it back were doing laundry for the people that didn't have it. We were, I had a gas stove, so I could still make grilled cheese sandwiches with no power, just a lighter, and, and people were having, cookouts in the backyard, sharing all the food that was going to be destroyed in refrigerators and freezers. There was such an outpouring of that heart-centered, I have no idea who you are, and we're very different in every way, and I want to help you. And it was beautiful to see that.
Loving kindness all
Yes.
over. Loving kindness. Yep.
It brings out the best in us.
Yeah.
It totally
The worst brings out the best in us, ultimately.
It
Isn't
does.
that weird? But because I think we just put down our armor and recognize, hey, we have something much more important that is endearing and is one with us.
Yeah. I love the Chinese proverb that from chaos come heroes.
From chaos comes what?
Heroes.
Heroes.
The people that will stand up and be there for everyone else.
Right.
And finding our own inner hero in this. What are we doing to be of service and to help and to raise the frequency and to get out of fear? Because I totally agree with you that one great master said that fear leads to the dark side. Oh, it was Yoda. but it's true. It's
right.
Anger leads to fear, fear leads to hate, hate leads to the dark side. I forget exactly the order that he had it, but yeah, it was like fear is at the heart of us sacrificing who we are.
Yeah.
And
well, wasn't it Yoda who said, "You tried. That's why you failed."
Yeah, or do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or when Luke said he couldn't get the
spaceship
craft out of the swamp, and he said, I didn't think I could. And then Yoda says, that is why you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we have the same master here.
So would it be possible, would love to answer, and I hope, I don't mean to cut you off, Lawrence, if I am, but just wanted to make sure to catch Ellen's question. Thank you.
So I think this discussion just now that started from Lawrence's question was really helpful for me, because I hear people saying the shift, and I'm thinking, what shift? Only because the only shift I was thinking of was political. And this really helps me zone in on why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And I don't like to, it's not that I don't like to, I get nervous to talk about politics in a mixed group, only because I don't want to put people off, but I realize that we're really after the same thing. And but I really, really liked, Jonna Rae, your answers for Lawrence, because I was like, oh, thank God I'm normal. But then I had to remember what my original question was before Lawrence asked his question. And it was the last, before Lawrence, there was a woman who asked a question, I can't remember who it was, about, do you ever doubt yourself?
Rebecca.
And
And so what I've been learning through this group and in a few other places is that my visions or my intuition can come through my imagination window, because that's the place where it comes from. But I get such small snippets that makes me doubt. I don't get a lot of detail. And I almost feel sometimes like I'm impenetrable. I mean, if that makes any sense. So I want to know how to go deeper than just getting little snippets. Um, I know it's going to come through the imagination window. And what I have been learning to do um, is um, is going with it and believing it and trusting it. So and when I do that, more comes. Few nights ago, 2 nights in a row, I was like on the verge of sleep, and one night I felt like someone blew in my face, and then a few nights later, it happened twice more in that
Wow.
night, um, and I was like, I wonder if someone's trying to get my attention. And then I got scared, and it hasn't happened again. So I must have like that craft must have turned around and went back. Um, so maybe do you think it's just practice, to constantly keep practicing with as little bit of fear as possible? Do you
That
make sense?
Yeah, you're already doing the most important thing, which is, desiring to have that be a part of you and bring that into your life. And
Yeah.
so, something uh, that I think is a beautiful symbol is the cornucopia,
Mm.
because that represents the small end of the basket represents the connection to Great Spirit. And then the cone comes and it sits down over us here on the earth. And whenever we're grateful for the bounty that we receive from Great Spirit, it's all around us. That's what the cornucopia represents. It represents that connection to this higher, positive, loving source, and we're in gratitude for all the blessings we receive from the source. And oh my gosh, here they are. So part of it is like every morning getting awake and saying, thank you for this gift of intuition. Guide me
Mm.
in how to use it in the most powerful and positive way. Something along that line, just some kind of
Okay.
simple little affirmation and being in the energy of the creator. Um,
Mm.
Something that happened when I was on my spiritual quest, and I had become very disillusioned because I was thinking everybody should be nice to each other. And when there was someone who was very highly regarded, who was coming from a lower frequency, especially towards, young women, I kind of didn't want to be on the planet anymore. And so I was in the dome meditating by myself again one night. And I said, okay, God, I don't want to be here at all anymore. So please take me. And I knew that I couldn't take my own life because of the karma that would have created. And my posse said, you can't leave now. You haven't learned about family yet. Because I was so removed from my actual, earth family. And
Mm.
um, so I said, well, if I have to stay, then I want to see something. It's like cutting a deal with the divine. And then the voices said, well, what do you want? And I said, I want to see the creation of the earth. And so immediately there was this phenomenal vision that I had where it was like energy and sound and light and just showing like the sun and the solar system, the planets, the galaxies, the universe. It was phenomenal. And then when I looked over here, there was nothing but black. And it wasn't like a, ooh, scary black. It was more like a pregnant black. Like everything was in there, but it was black. And I said to the voices, there's nothing over there. And they said, create something. And that's when I realized that when we come from that consciousness of, you know, seeing it and feeling it and breathing it in and breathing it out and creating it, we make it happen. We make it happen. And so you're totally on the right track because you're already desiring to bring that into your world. So
Mhm.
I would just, get into the idea of the cornucopia, already being grateful for it being there in your life, and then
Mm.
seeing how it happens. And you're
Mhm.
right. Oh, somebody, okay, okay. But listening to especially stringed instruments like piano, guitar, sitar, violin, cello, stringed instruments really work on opening up the heart. And so listening to that, doing meditation, any kind. Dr. Brian Weiss has a wonderful past life regression. You can see on YouTube. Look for the version with no ads so that you're not, you know, in Mesopotamia, and it's like, are your gutters clean tonight? So you don't want to be jarred out of that, consciousness. But that is going to put you in that space. Um, and being aware that not coming from a place of fear, because what Lawrence was saying about that is so totally right on, that you don't want to be in that lower frequency, but
Mhm.
just seeing that bubble of white light around you. Or another thing that I love to do is to visualize 4 crystals in the 4 corners of the room where I'm in, and then seeing a beam of light going from the crystal to the center of the ceiling, making a pyramid of healing golden light all around me. So
Mm.
that raises the frequency up so that anything of a lower frequency can't come anywhere near you. Excuse me, please, and you can totally trust what you're
Mhm.
getting. But you're doing the right stuff. I happen to know a class that's coming up that could help you develop this. And and because you guys are you, I would love to give you like a 30% discount on the classes coming up in March if you want to do it. So you can go to my website and look up workshops, and it's the Practical Spirituality 101. But this is the one where I tell people that they're not getting out of the room until they can do an accurate reading. And first everybody's all scared, but in the first hour of the class, everybody does it, and it's not coming from me. I was shown how to do this. And I said, how do I teach people? And I got, step 1, step 2, step 3, and it works because it's not coming from my ego. It's, I'm the mouthpiece. And but being in groups like this where you can talk about this,
Yeah.
reading books about this, and always being discerning, like question everything that you read. Don't just blindly say, well, that doesn't sound right, but it must be right because they're saying it. It's like, no, it's like the aliens told me, you know, be very discerning, be very aware of how your heart feels when you're around a person or around an idea. Does it always be questioning? Be very discerning. I could be totally crazy for all you guys know. So,
We're,
but just
we're feeling through our hearts and being discerning. I feel a huge heart presence myself.
yay! But you're doing all the right stuff by just having the desire to be there. And
Okay.
the other thing that I tell people is when you're doing it from the place of how can I be of service, not look what I can do, but how can
Right.
I help someone, then you can totally trust it, and it's only going to get more and more solid for you.
Okay.
And
Okay.
an analogy that I love to use is we're at a concert. We're listening to this symphony orchestra, and we're saying, "Oh, it sounds so beautiful." And there's a professional musician sitting in the row in front of us who turns around and she says, "The second violin is flat, and it has ruined the whole thing." And we're like, "Oh my God, she must be magical." But no, she spent years expanding that spectrum, her auditory spectrum, so that she can hear nuanced things that, us muggles can't. We have no idea that this is going on. So in the same way, we can expand our awareness so that we can perceive things and see things, know things that are kind of beyond the spectrum of what most people are um, taught. They don't even know that this other end of the spectrum exists.
Mhm.
But except for kids, because they hear music, we don't. But
Hmm.
just keep going. You're doing all the right stuff,
Thank you. Thank you.
and play a lot. Go outside and play.
Yeah. Well, I laugh a lot.
That works. That works because I think you guys have an homework card that you were going to post for people.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for your question.
Yeah, that's a great question. But on this little card that I gave them that they're going to post, it's like 10 steps for developing your inner intuitive. And just little things like start your day with good morning, God, not good God morning, and journaling dreams and interesting occurrences, all these little coincidences that are happening in everybody's life, jot them down. Have an interspecies conversation, go into your heart, talk to your pet, have a conversation with loved ones in spirit, go into your heart, talk to your great grandmother. Laugh is number 5. Listen and meditate, go outside and play, create something delightful. So whether it's an idea or you cook something or it's art, or look for the lesson in everything and be thankful. And I'm telling you, those things are going to make a huge difference. So.
That's so beautiful.
But I think you guys are going to post that so people can just get
Can we
that.
do that, Carol? We can,
Yes.
okay, I can send you, or either one of us, but it can send you the image and then it can be part of the,
We'll post
what's,
it on the Facebook page. Yeah.
okay. Oh
Wonderful.
my goodness.
Wow. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I want to thank you, Jonna Rae, for everything that you've shared with us. Thank you, Wendy, for being such a wonderful MC. And I knew your close connection with Jonna Rae would just make it so really wonderful and warm and fuzzy, as we were saying earlier. So,
Thank
um,
you.
so thank you all
It's so
for
genuine.
joining us. Yeah, it really is. To wind up, I'd just love to ask Jonna Rae if you would give us in a sentence or two any words of wisdom to guide us for this new year.
I have something that I call the ancestor blessing, and I step into the circle of my ancestors for their love, guidance, healing, and protection. Only good shall come to me, only good shall go from me. I give thanks, I give thanks, I give thanks. And when you stay in the energy of that, only good can come to you, and only good can go from you. And you're going to make such a phenomenal difference in your life and in the frequency and the consciousness of the entire planet.
Thank you
Because that's
so much.
multidimensional, yeah,
Multidimensional.
with the
Yes.
ancestors.
And I think that's one of the things I kept hearing, a theme I kept hearing as you were talking, is that developing our intuition, developing our gifts is a way that we go beyond just this physical awareness into metaphysical awareness, which is who we really are. That was another theme I kept hearing you say. So let's at the end of the year, I want to check in with everybody and see just how much you've developed those skills. And thank you so much, Jonna Rae, for inspiring us. Give her a great hand.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for your amazing questions too. Fantastic questions from the group. Jonna Rae, I love you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and Carol for inviting Jonna Rae.
Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you to my friends who tuned in too. I appreciate you guys.
Could I just make a comment here?
Sure.
Remarks were being made about questions. And in writing a book, I found that one of the most important things to do is to learn how to ask the right questions, because that's the only way we can get truth. Too often we ask disempowering questions like, how can I, rather than what. We're asking how questions. And how is like using the tools without knowing what it is you're using them for. So I think we need to learn how to ask ourselves the empowering questions, like what mindfulness would best serve me in this situation, rather than how can I solve this problem? You know, so I think
we don't ask enough questions, do we? And then, like you say, to hone in on questions that, the way I look at it is questions that are aligned with our soul, with our higher self.
That just to speak to that for a second, I think that's an excellent point. And something, a free resource on my website that I found out about decades ago, and I share it with people now, is the spiritual compass, which forces you to go deep inside yourself. And it's a paper divided into 4 quadrants. And the first quadrant is I love to, and you have to write down 10 things that you love. Okay. The second quadrant is I'm good at. You have to write down 10 things that you're good at, and there are going to be overlaps there. And then the third quadrant is where people take me off the Christmas card list, because that says essential for a meaningful life, and you have to write it with your non-dominant hand. And so you're writing down the 10 things that you feel are deeply purposeful, deeply meaningful in your life, but with your non-dominant hand. And the last one is all the external influences in your life. And that's people say I was born to. So like if your second grade teacher said, you're really good at math, you know, or whatever, just 10 external things that have been reflected back to you. So you make this list of 40 things, and then you narrow it down to 5 in each category, and then 3. And from those 12 concepts that you have spent a couple hours probably doing, because we're very superficial. We usually don't go that deep with something. 10, examples of what's meaningful. You weave that, then those 12 concepts, into your spiritual compass. And there's an example of how to do it on my website, and that layout. That might be a wonderful way to begin the new year, because it puts us in touch with what truly matters to us. Who are we? What brings us joy? What do we feel is purposeful? What do we feel we want to accomplish? How can we, give to other people? It's all in there. It's all in there. And from that point on, after you have honestly, authentically done that, you don't have to show it to anybody else. So be very, very honest. From that point on, if something comes up in your life and it's not in alignment with one of those concepts, it's a distraction. It's coming from maybe even a lower frequency of fear, as opposed to why you really feel that you're here and what you're really all about. So people have changed the direction of their lives after doing this exercise. So, I think it addresses what we've been talking about, and helps us, chart a course that makes a difference.
Thank you for that. That's homework for everybody. We want to hear more about it at the next meeting.
And I will know if you don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.